CBS 2 Broadcast Center in Chicago. You're watching CBS 2 News at 5.
The Eastland. It was a beautiful, big ship that could hold 2,700 passengers. And 100 years ago to the day, it sank in the biggest disaster in Chicago history.
Vince Girasoli joins us now with how this somber day is being commemorated.
Good evening, Rob. Good evening, Kate. Known as the Speed Queen of the Great Lakes, the SS Eastland was one of 5 boats meant to ferry Western Electric employees to a picnic in Indiana. Today, the families of survivors, victims, and rescue workers gathered at the southern base of the Clark Street Bridge, where the boat tipped over, eventually claiming 844 lives, to mark the 100th anniversary of one of Chicago's darkest hours.
What ended in so many deaths started with promise. 7,000 lined up along the Chicago River to set sail for a company picnic.
Everybody wanted to go on the Eastland because it was the first ship scheduled to take off. It was such a freak accident. Nobody expected this giant 300-foot steel ship to go over. When it went over, it was just instant death for many people because they were below decks.
Author Jay Bonansinga has chronicled the many ironies surrounding the deadly day.
So there were 2,500 on board.
Way too many people for that boat. The boat was listing greatly for 20 or 30 minutes before it went over.
Ironically, says Bonansinga, the Eastland may have been top-heavy with too many lifeboats on its upper decks for its own good.
That contributed to it pitching and rocking and finally capsizing.
Afterwards, frightened crowds flocked to the scene. Welders rushed in, cutting holes in the hull to reach the living and the dead. Volunteer divers searched for bodies, and a morgue was set up in the West Loop's armory.
Both my grandparents were on board and my great-aunt were on board, and all 3 survived.
It wasn't easy, but at times Carl Supp convinced his grandmother, Elsie Krause, who's now deceased, to share her story of survival.
She actually went into the water and was being pulled under the water by someone that was beneath her. Her hair, which was very long, was still floating on the water, and a rescuer grabbed her hair and pulled her into the boat by her hair.
A page in Chicago's history we pause to remember today.
It was an instantaneous, silent, over before you blinked disaster.
You know, there are almost too many stories to tell about the Eastland, about how mothers placed their children on floating debris to save their lives, or how some hypothermia victims were taken to the morgue mistaken for dead. Throughout this weekend, families of those connected to the disaster are gathering to make sure that the next generation doesn't forget. You know, Rob and Kate, keep this in mind, how women dressed 100 years ago, long dresses, heavy boots. Yes. The water weighted them down and caused them to sink, and people were just doing their best to try to grab them and save them.
And everyone seems to have just such an incredible story. The woman who was pulled up by her hair, that's just
That's
stunning.
right, and there are some people who could never go near the water again, and others who made sure to teach their children how to swim, because those who could swim were the ones who were able to save themselves.
What a story. Yeah. All right, Vince, thanks.
Thank you, Vince.